think the natural way to build a chain when you're like at a level where you know how to build a chain, but you're not like super pro or anything, is that you kind of build one link at a time and you kind of finish every link as you build it. So maybe you build like this, and then you want to build sandwiches, I guess. So build like this, and you put a blue, and at some point you drew a green. Then you build like this. And that's great, and it works if you get all the colors you need. But there's a problem with building like that. So, for example, at this point, your chain is entirely complete. Everything's connected. As soon as you pop the yellows, everything's going to clear. So in that sense, it's really clean and it's complete. But where would you put a red? The red has no specific place to go where it would be immediately useful, so you would have to create a new group when you put a red down. And where would you put a green? Well, same thing for the green. There's no specific place where it would be useful except the tail. Like you could power up the tail, and that's pretty useful. But besides that, there's nowhere where you could put it. You would have to make a new group in order for it to be useful. And that's true with the blues and with the yellows. So if you always drew like 3 and 1, like 3 greens and then a yellow, and then 3 blues, and then a green and a green. If you always drew 3 and 1, you could build this every time, but if you got to this point and you drew like a green and a red, again, you have to put them somewhere here because the greens can tell. It's kind of useful to put the green like this. But now if you drew a yellow and a blue, you now have 4 individual colors that are all their own separate groups that have no specific place. And so it's really hard to keep chaining because like you have these 3 individual or like 4 individual groups if you count the green. Let's say you draw a yellow and a red. You're kind of like you would have to skip the green probably in this case and it would work out. But let's say you don't draw any reds anymore and you just draw a bunch of greens. Well, there's no specific place to put greens. You have to make a new link with them. So so now you're like getting a bunch of Puyo that you can't use anywhere, and you're making a bunch of new groups that are just solo groups that are really tough to use unless you draw 3 of them, because then it becomes a group of 3 that's easy to work with. So if you have a perfectly complete chain, it's actually really weak in that sense because no Puyo has anywhere, like any place to go. You have to make a new group with every color. So on the other hand, if your chain wasn't perfectly complete, let's say it's like this, and you're kind of building ahead, and you build like this, for example. Well, so the first thing is it makes it harder because there's a lot more to think about and a lot more to remember. You need blues here, you need yellows here, you need blues here, you need a red here, and you want greens here and a red. That's a lot more to remember. That's why it's a lot harder and why you generally wouldn't start out building like that, because it is harder. But now let's talk about where you could use colors. Let's say you draw a red, you could use a red here or a red here. Both of them work. So if it was red-blue, you could put it over here. If it was red-green, you could put it over here. If it was red-yellow, there's no specific place. Oh, well, actually, in this example, you could put it over here, and that actually works really nicely. So there's a place to put a red no matter what color it's attached to. And if you draw blues, let's say you draw a blue-green, you put it here. That works very nicely. Draw blue-yellow, You can put it here or here, either direction, but that works really nicely. You draw blue, red, put it here, and that works really nicely. Now, let's say you draw a yellow. Well, you've got places to put the yellow. If it's a yellow-blue, you can put it either direction. If it's a yellow-red, you can build a head like this. If it's a yellow-green, you could do this, which would work. Or you could think about doing this. And if you draw greens, well, you can probably put them over here and be just fine. But if you notice, there's a place for every color you draw pretty much. So like no matter what you draw, you're gonna have a good spot to put it. You just have to be able to recognize where that is. And if you compare that to when you build a single link at a time and complete everything, it's actually a really big difference. So again, in this situation, you have no proper place for any color except arguably green to add to the tail. But otherwise, you have to start a new group with every single color you draw and hope you draw more of it because otherwise it's going to get awkward. But if you don't complete every link like that and you build ahead, and instead build like this, well, all of a sudden you like have places to put every single color that you can draw. So like green, blue. So there's like, so it's okay to start a new link with greens here because like if you don't draw any greens for a while, well that means you're drawing a red or a yellow or a blue. And again, if you draw red, well you need a red over here. If you draw a yellow, well you need a yellow over here. And if you draw blue, well you need blues over here. So even though you have to commit to a single color group for a moment, it's okay because the other colors you draw have other places to put them that are really useful and pretty obvious once you get used to looking at things like that. So like you have this single green and you want to draw more greens, but it's okay if you don't draw greens for a while because every other color has a place to put it. And then if you end up somehow like completing every other link and still not drawing a green, now you start to get to the point where it's like now you have no place for any other color but green. But that's like not very likely to happen. And even if it does, like you can still, you're not in too bad of a spot here because you were able to build out more of a chain. But that's the power of having unfinished links because it gives you a place to put colors. So so it's kind of counterintuitive, I'd say, where most people would intuitively feel like, well, if you can just complete every link one at a time, you're building a good chain. But the problem is, if you complete every link, then you have no place to put more. Like, you can't put anything else. Like, you can't put more of the color anywhere. You have to create a new group with every single color and hope you draw more of it, like, almost immediately. Because you have no place for any color. Like no color has a good spot to put it in this situation. Unless you draw like 3 of it. Like if you draw 3 blues, you could do that, for example. But if you don't draw 3 of it, and you only draw 1 and 1, it becomes really tough. So that's why if you can build in a way where you leave a lot of unfinished links and build ahead, so like if you draw blues here, instead of committing here, you probably want to put them here and you leave this link unfinished. And then as you build out more of the chain, you'll run into that same situation again. So like instead of completing every single link, like sometimes you do want to complete them so you can build higher, but instead of rigorously completing every single link all the time, sometimes you want to leave links unfinished so you have a place to put your colors. So think that can be a useful thing to understand when you're trying to go for bigger chains. So if you don't complete every link all the time, that makes it easier to build a lot of times. And you don't end up with as many color restrictions or color needs when you do that because you have a place to put all your colors.